The carriage rumbled to a stop. Outside the reinforced walls of Elandra, the forest loomed, dark, silent, and heavy with anticipation. Valegrove wasn't known for being quiet, not even at sunrise. But now not even the birds dared chirp. Strike Team Alpha disembarked one by one. Kale was the first to step down, eyes scanning the terrain with the precision of a seasoned commander. Darius followed without a word, dragging his massive shield behind him. Shade was already gone the moment the door cracked open. No one even saw him leave. Marianne helped Reyna down next while Inigo and Lyra took up the rear. A few meters ahead, nestled between the roots of a jagged cliff face, was the rift. It shimmered like a vertical pool of dark liquid glass, humming with quiet menace. Occasional pulses of blue and violet light danced across its surface like veins. "That's it," Kale said, drawing his blade. "Weapons out. No telling what's on the other side." Inigo activated his active combat uniform but no weapons yet, and Lyra notched an arrow into her longbow. "Oh, so that's your ability, huh? To change clothes?" Shade commented. "Yeah, kind of like it," Inigo replied nonchalantly. One by one they passed through the rift. Inigo braced for madness. For swirling skies, floating platforms, or some distorted dimension like the descriptions Elise had once given of unstable gates. But instead he stepped into darkness. A cave. Massive. Echoing. Pulled. The ground beneath his boots was solid stone. The air smelled of iron and rot. Dripping water echoed from unseen corners. The rift shimmered silently behind them. He blinked, eyes adjusting to the dim blue glow of bioluminescent crystals jutting from the cave walls. "So much for floating islands," Inigo said. "Rifts are unpredictable," Marianne said softly. "This one seems to mimic an underground system." Pub Future ads. Kale was already moving ahead, sword held in front. "Stay sharp." Formation. Darius up front, Reyna and Marianne in center, Shade flanking left. Inigo, Lyra, rear. No arguments. The team shifted into motion. The cave was long and winding. Cracks in the wall occasionally let in shafts of pale blue light from above. But the deeper they went, the fewer of those openings remained. It was only 10 minutes in when the first attack came. A faint whistling sound, then a sharp cry from Reyna. Above. Kale didn't hesitate. He raised his sword and with a single sweeping arc of steel, deflected 2 arrows mid-flight. The clanging sound of metal on metal echoed through the cavern. The team looked up. Shapes crouched along the ledges. Lizard-like. Scaly. Hunched. Draconids. Their limbs were thin, but their torsos thick and armored with jagged bone-like plates. Their faces were long, mouths filled with curved teeth, and most held crude but deadly bows carved from horn. One of them snarled, a dry, rasping sound, and let loose another volley. Kale stepped forward. Darius' shield. Darius lifted the massive slab of iron on his arm just in time, catching a rain of arrows meant for Reyna and Marianne. Shade blurred into motion, leaping up toward the ledge like a shadow set loose. Kale turned to Inigo and Lyra. "Stand back. Let us handle this." Lyra's brow twitched. Inigo gave a subtle shrug. They watched. Kale moved like a tempest, parrying and lunging, cutting down a draconid that dropped from above. Darius took up the front, absorbing arrows with his shield while knocking one enemy clean across the cavern with a bash. Reyna chanted under her breath, launching bolts of searing mana that exploded on contact. Shade danced from shadow to shadow, slitting throats and vanishing before the next enemy could turn. It was clean, efficient, deadly. Inigo watched, quietly noting how each of them moved. They weren't just strong, they were practiced. Sharpened. Game. Still a part of him burned. He didn't like standing still. As the last archer dropped, Reyna lowered her staff and grinned. "Phew. Not bad for a warm-up." Darius grunted. "Too many for scouts." "Means we're close," Kale said. "Or someone's guarding something." They pressed on. The cave narrowed and then widened again, revealing what looked like an open chasm. Bioluminescent moss clung to the far walls, casting ghostly patterns on the jagged stone. Stalactites hung like blades from the ceiling. Then came the next wave. Not archers. These were larger. Draconids again, but this time their bodies were bulkier, more muscular. No bows. just clenched fists the size of hammers and crude iron bracers around their forearms. They charged. Kale immediately raised a hand. Inigo. Fire. Stay back. Inigo opened his mouth. Then closed it. He nodded once. Lyra looked like she wanted to argue, but after a second she turned away and leaned against the wall, arrow still nocked but lowered. The battle began. Darius met the charge head-on. His shield clanged as the first Draconaut struck him with a punch that cracked the stone beneath his feet. Kale dashed around him aiming for pressure points, knees, necks, spines. Reyna summoned barriers of flame to slow their movement, while Shade slipped past them to land critical strikes to their kidneys and hearts. Marianne stood still, murmuring blessings that lit her hands. Darius glowed faintly, his movements quicker now, less sluggish. The monsters hit harder. They were faster. But Strike Team Alpha was faster still. Inigo watched, his eyes sharp. They were good. Damn good. But so was he. And yet here he stood. Sidelined. Watching. He swallowed the bitterness rising in his throat. Let them have their show. For now. Lyra crossed her arms, whispering, "How long are we supposed to watch?" "Until they say otherwise," Inigo replied. She narrowed her eyes. "They're testing us. Let them." The last of the brute Draconauts fell with a thunderous crash. Kale exhaled and raised his sword again. "Forward. There will be more. No praise. No acknowledgement. Just orders." And the march deeper into the unknown. Inigo followed, silent. But in his mind a promise was already forming. If they found themselves in danger they would have to beg him for his help. Yes, sure they are strong, but surely they are stronger forces inside this cave. The deeper they went, the tighter the air became. The stone walls seemed to close in, the light from the bioluminescent moss dimming with each turn. The floor grew uneven, jagged in places, forcing them to watch their footing. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water or the soft scuff of boots against rock. Kale held up a hand. The team halted. "Movement ahead," he said. His voice was calm. Controlled. Darius raised his shield instinctively. Reyna's hand curled around her wand, magic already forming along its crystal tip. Shade melted into the dark, becoming one with the shadows along the cavern wall. Marianne stepped behind the frontliners, her lips moving in quiet prayer. Inigo and Lyra lingered at the rear again. Observing. Waiting. A soft chittering sound echoed through the space. Then they came. Draconauts. But different. These ones were leaner, faster. Claws clicked against stone. Their eyes glowed faintly with red malice, and they moved not in mindless charge, but in formation. Coordinated. One screeched from the ceiling and the rest surged forward. Kale didn't hesitate. Hold the line. Darius slammed his shield into the ground as the first monster leapt. It bounced off the iron plate, stunned, but only for a moment. The others closed in quickly, too fast for brute strength alone to stop. Kale became a blur of silver. His sword sliced the air, each strike precise, practiced. One Draconaut lost its head in a clean arc. Another staggered backward as he flipped and landed a reverse slash along its chest. Shade was already behind them, daggers dancing between gaps in scales. Blood sprayed, but he moved on before it could even hit the ground. Reyna let loose a blast of arcing lightning, chaining between three enemies and dropping them twitching to the stone. Marianne weaved between spells and fighters, shielding Darius as he absorbed strike after strike. They were like a storm. Perfect and brutal. And Inigo? He was still standing still. Lyra, beside him, tensed with each blow. Her knuckles whitened against her bow. She said nothing. But her silence was sharper than words. Again they didn't ask for help. Again they didn't need it. Or so they thought. When the last Draconaut collapsed in a heap of gore and claw, Kale merely nodded. We keep moving. The air's changing. They walked. The chasm widened. A gentle slope carried them lower, deeper into the earth. The light from the rift was long gone now. Only the moss remained to guide them. That and the glow of Reyna's staff. The silence returned, but this time it was heavier. Tense. The calm before a storm. Inigo kept pace, boots crunching over gravel. His eyes never left the shadows ahead. He could feel it. Something was close. They rounded a bend, and then the tunnel opened into a massive chamber. It was enormous. dome-shaped with a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. Pillars of stone jutted from the ground like natural fortresses. Pools of stagnant water lined the edges. A broken ruin, half a temple, half a fortress, stood in the center like the bones of a forgotten god. And a roar. It didn't shake the air. It shook the soul. The sound came from beyond the ruin, and with it, a massive figure stepped forward. Not a draconut. Something worse. Something commanding. Its body was a mountain of blackened muscle wrapped in armor forged from something unnatural. Dark runes glowed along its chest and shoulders. A long, ragged cloak dragged behind it like a funeral shroud. Its helmet crowned with jagged horns, like a warlord made of nightmares. And in its hand, a massive weapon. A staff. As tall as a man with a bladed end and a core that shimmered like molten crystal. It radiated malice. Darius stepped forward instinctively, shield raised. Shade tensed beside him. Reyna's eyes widened. Kale's grip tightened on his sword. That's not a regular monster, Reyna whispered. Boss-class entity, Marianne confirmed. Maybe more. And it wasn't alone. From the shadows behind it, two more monsters emerged, larger, tougher-looking draconauts with glowing armor and jagged weapons. Their eyes burned with the same light as their masters. Kale snapped his command. Formation Alpha. Darius charged. Shade vanished. Reyna and Marianne broke left and began casting. Inigo took a step forward, but Kale turned. Stay back. Inigo's jaw tightened. You sure? We don't need support, Kale said. Not yet. Lyra's expression was unreadable. She looked at Inigo but said nothing. So again they stood still. And watched. The battle began with violence. Darius slammed into one of the boss's lackeys, his shield shattering stone. But the creature didn't budge. It caught the edge of the shield and twisted, sending Darius stumbling. Kale intercepted the other with a flurry of attacks, but the beast's armor deflected most blows. Sparks flew. He ducked a swipe that would have taken his head off. Shade tried to ambush the warlord, but the moment he struck, the massive monster turned. It caught his blade mid-air. Then backhanded him across the room. Shade hit the wall with a crack. He didn't move. Shade. Marianne called, already dashing toward him with a glow in her palms. Reyna shouted a spell, but the warlord raised its staff and the magic dispersed like smoke. Kale grit his teeth. Focus the lackeys. We take them out, then the big one. They fought hard. Marianne healed where she could. Reyna provided bursts of cover fire. Kale danced between blades. Darius held the front with everything he had. But it wasn't enough. The boss was too strong. Too fast. Every swing of its weapon cracked the stone floor. Every movement shattered the rhythm of their formation. Inigo watched. The moment would come. He could feel it. Lyra whispered, "They're losing ground." Yeah. Should we? He didn't answer. Because the warlord turned. And looked directly at them. Its eyes burned like dying stars. It raised its staff. And pointed. Toward Inigo. Toward Lyra. As if it knew. As if it had been waiting. The moment was coming. And they would no longer be sidelined. Okay, it's time for us to shine, Inigo smirked. Okay, it's time for us to shine, Inigo smirked. The warlord's molten staff ignited with pulsing energy. Crackling, humming, screaming with magic as it gathered in its crystal core. Then it released. A bolt of condensed arcane energy streaked across the chamber, a glowing lance of death heading straight for him and Lyra. Inigo didn't flinch. 500 tokens, Freedom Shop, Ballistic Shield, Series XRAM Mk4. A sharp flash of blue lit up his right wrist, and with a mechanical whir, a solid ballistic shield materialized around his forearm. Matte black plating layered with carbon mesh, maglock stabilizing its center, and a sleek digital HUD flaring to life across its rim. He brought it up just in time. The spell struck. The entire cavern lit up in blue and violet, thunder cracking around them like a dragon's scream. Sparks exploded as the shield took the brunt of the force. Inigo's boots scraped back across the stone floor, digging trenches beneath him, but he held. Smoke curled from the shield's surface. Its outer rim glowed red-hot. The Freedom OS HUD blinked. Impact absorbed. Structural integrity, 72%. Inigo's eyes narrowed. By turn. Summon W7. As soon as he said that, something spawned from the ether beside him. It hit the ground hard with a mechanical thud. A low-profile armored vehicle the size of a large dog. A hybrid of tank and nightmare. Twin miniguns unfolded from recessed compartments. A dorsal pod clicked open, revealing 6 high-explosive micromissiles. Its treads rolled out like the limbs of a predator. Combat Unit Online. Designation: W7 Wheeler. AI link established. Wheeler, Inigo commanded, pointing toward the warlord. Engage primary hostile. Open fire. The drone responded instantly, its engines purring with menace. It zipped forward with shocking speed for its size, treads handling the rocky terrain with ease. Twin 5.56mm miniguns whirred to life, and then opened fire. The cavern roared with the echo of steel on steel. Hundreds of rounds per minute tore through the air, peppering the boss's shoulder and chest armor with stinging impacts. Sparks flew. The warlord staggered back, its dark cloak fluttering as it tried to shield its face with its staff. And then the missiles fired. 3 thudded into the warlord's left flank in rapid succession. Boom, boom, boom. The cavern trembled as fire and shockwaves erupted. Stone cracked. Dust and ash bloomed from the point of impact. Reyna screamed above the chaos. What the hell is that thing? Is that a golem? Kale barked, shielding his face from the blasts. Inigo stepped forward, letting his shield retract. It's my familiar. You're what? Marianne gasped, still kneeling beside Shade. Summoned beast, Inigo said coolly. Very expensive one. The warlord roared in pain and rage, shaking off the explosions. Chunks of armor had been blasted off, revealing dark, scaled flesh beneath. But it wasn't down. Of course you're tougher than that, Inigo muttered. He slung his rifle forward, the standard M4 carbine he'd favored for weeks. He aimed, fired a burst at the warlord's exposed midsection. Sparks. Okay. No penetration. The hell? He adjusted and aimed for the eye sockets. Still nothing. The rounds bounced off its dark hide like pebbles. Inigo clicked his tongue. Fine. You want firepower. 500 tokens. Freedom Shop. Mounted auto turret. M2.50 caliber heavy gun. Another flash. Behind him, a sleek tripod-mounted turret materialized with a loud thud, its long barrel already swiveling to acquire targets. The HUD in Inigo's visor blinked with telemetry. Auto turret M2 online. Manual override available. The weapon spun, locked on and fired. Boom 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 boom. Each round thundered through the cavern like cannon fire. The warlord recoiled as one hit its shoulder, shattering the remaining armor there, and the next buried itself into its chest. Blood sprayed, dark and steaming. Inigo, Lyra called, her voice calm but focused. Right flank. One of the lackeys is closing in. He turned just as one of the boss's elite guards lunged. Claws outstretched. Teeth bared. Before he could even raise his gun, a blur of green and silver cut it off. Fire. She moved like wind given form. Spirit essence, she muttered. A faint green aura shimmered around her body. Her feet barely touched the stone as she flipped past the charging monster, an arrow already notched and drawn in the blink of an eye. Then a second arrow appeared beside it, then a third. A glowing outline of overlapping arrowheads shimmered around her bowstring. Inigo blinked. Wait, was that? She fired. 3 arrows split mid-flight into 9, then 12. Homing missiles. The arrows curved unnaturally, streaking around cover and striking the monster from 3 sides at once. They embedded deep into its limbs and chest and then pulsed once, exploding in staggered bursts of radiant light. The monster howled and fell, smoking and limp. Lyra didn't wait. She sprinted to another ledge, feet launching her up with barely a grunt, and fired a rapid burst of enchanted arrows, one after another, each one glowing with a spiraling trail of spirit energy. The second elite Draconaut stumbled backward, its arms skewered with 3 shots, its face half melted from the spirit burn. Spirit bow technique, Reyna murmured from behind a stone pillar, eyes wide. That's elven archery. High-tier stuff. Kale shouted, cover fire. Stay coordinated. Inigo gave him a grin that could cut steel. Oh, now you want coordination. The warlord roared again, injured but not broken. Its staff raised high, glowing with a furious red now, pulsing with raw magic. W7 darted behind a stone outcropping and deployed smoke, obscuring vision as the drone retreated to reload and recalibrate. Wheeler, deploy countermeasures. Marianne, stay clear. Inigo barked. The turret repositioned and fired another burst. The warlord swung its staff in a wide arc, shattering the stone the turret was mounted on, but not before 2 more rounds slammed into its hip and right leg. Cracks ran through its armor like splintered glass. Lyra landed beside Inigo again, drawing in a breath. Her glow dimmed slightly. I'm down to half essence. Hold tight. We're not done. Inigo checked his HUD. W7. Ammo remaining, 625 rounds missiles. 3 remaining AI, active. M2 turret, operational. Heat level, 56%. He gave a sharp whistle. Wheeler, pincer pattern. Fire remaining missiles and suppress left side. W7 beeped once, then rolled back into the open, launching its final 3 missiles at the warlord's exposed rib section. Boom, boom, boom. The warlord reeled, one arm now hanging limp. Smoke coiled around it. Its staff shattered at the shaft, cut clean by a lucky .50 cal round. It roared again, but it was faltering. Then, Kale appeared, sword flashing with divine light as Marianne finished chanting a holy enhancement spell. The knight didn't speak. He struck. Right across the warlord's exposed chest. The blade bit deep. And this time it stayed down. The warlord staggered backward, stumbled, and collapsed with a shuddering crash that echoed across the entire chamber. For a moment nothing moved. Only smoke. And silence. Then, you earned 5,000 tokens from displaying freedom and slaying the beast. New token balance, 148,150. Reyna hooped. Yes. Darius exhaled. Kale slowly lowered his sword. Shade groaned from where he'd been pulled to cover. Inigo walked forward, stepping over the blood-soaked stone and steaming chunks of armor. Wheeler rolled beside him, gears clicking softly. What was all that? Reyna asked, slack-jawed. The weapons, the shield, the familiar. Inigo looked back, a lopsided grin on his face. Freedom, he said. That's what it looks like. Lyra chuckled beside him, lowering her bow. Took them long enough to notice. Kale approached, looking between them with narrowed eyes. You've been holding back. You told me to, Inigo replied. After hearing that, he knelt to his knee and then lowered his head. I apologize for sidelining you in this mission. I admit I underestimated both of your skills, and doing so could have put our lives in jeopardy. What's with him getting too formal all of a sudden? Don't worry about it. At least it's done. The cavern still echoed faintly with the aftermath of battle. Smoke coiling through the air, scorched stone glowing with residual heat, and the scent of gunpowder mixing with burnt flesh. For a long moment no one moved. Then Kale sheathed his blade with a metallic snap and turned toward the party. We need to keep moving. The rift will start closing in under 2 hours. If we're not out by then, we get folded into the void, Reyna muttered grimly, her earlier cheer fading. Marianne helped Shade to his feet, his movements stiff but conscious now. I'll patch him as we go, she said. Kale gave a short nod, then turned to the center of the chamber where the warlord's body lay broken. Scavenge what you can. Rift materials fetch 10 times the usual market value. Let's not waste this kill. Everyone moved. The team fanned out, weapons still drawn as they approached the battlefield's remains. The larger Draconid elites lay scattered, smoking, bleeding, their armor still faintly glowing with cursed energy. Even in death, their forms were intimidating. Kale began carefully removing armor plating from one, storing fragments in a rune-marked bag. Each piece shimmered faintly, runes etched deep into the material. Darius cracked open a claw with a hammer, whistling low. These things are built like siege weapons. Reyna moved to one of the elite guards she'd helped pin down. Her fingers sparked with arcane light as she traced the creature's blood, drawing a circle before carefully lifting a scale the size of a dinner plate. Rift-forged scale. Alchemists would kill for this. Meanwhile, Inigo was crouched beside the warlord's body, W7 at his side like a silent sentry. He pried loose the shattered remnants of the molten staff, storing it into his inventory. The core crystal was still faintly glowing, a volatile pulsating mass of condensed rift magic. Plus 1 warlord core shard. Items stored. That'll sell for a fortune, Inigo muttered to himself. Or make something insane if we find the right crafter. Just as he stood up, he heard a soft voice behind him. Ah, Reyna. She had crept over to W7, her eyes wide with unrestrained wonder. The drone's targeting optics blinked in a steady pattern, non-hostile, but its miniguns were retracted, giving it a slightly less terrifying silhouette. Reyna bent down just a little, keeping her voice high and gentle. Who's a little creature, huh? The drone chirped. Are you talking to it like it's a pet? Inigo asked with a raised brow, amusement creeping into his voice. He's adorable, Marianne added, now standing beside Reyna. Look at how he blinked when she said that. Lyra, arms crossed, stepped up as well and smirked. Wheeler, huh? Figures you'd give it a nickname like that. I didn't, Inigo said. That's its designation. WZN stands for Wheeled Light Support Node. Lyra crouched beside the drone and gave the treads a once-over. Feels warm. And those pods where that exploding arrow thingy coming out are cute too. I like him. The drone gave a low mechanical whir, its version of a purr perhaps. Inigo chuckled at the sight of all 3 women fawning over the combat drone like it was a puppy that hadn't just leveled a battlefield. You 3 do realize this thing's built for war, right? I bet it also likes belly rubs, Reyna whispered. W7's optics rotated curiously. Inigo just shook his head and smiled. All right, enough bonding time. Let's move out. The team packed quickly after that. Every useful piece of monster hide, claw, bone, armor or magical core was secured. Kale gave the all clear and with a quick formation they exited the chamber the way they came. They retraced their steps in silence. No new threats emerged. No reinforcements crawled from the depths. Whatever the warlord was protecting, it had already been destroyed, or consumed in the collapse of the temple ruins. Reyna muttered, that was weirdly short for a rift. Marianne agreed. Rift instability usually lasts longer. And we've seen waves before. This one had just the opening swarm and the boss. Could be a minor breach, Darius said. Still weird. Kale remained silent. His eyes never stopped scanning the shadows. Eventually the party reached the rift's mouth. The tunnel they entered from now crackled faintly with magical residue. The air shimmered like heat waves and the moss along the walls had gone dim, drained of energy. The rift itself, a swirling tear of blue and red energy hanging in the air like a bleeding wound, had begun to contract. They were just in time. Inigo turned back, taking one last look at the cavern. Nothing stirred. Nothing followed. The warlord was dead. The mission for once had gone smoother than expected. The team stepped through. And in the next breath, they were standing back on solid ground, outside the rift gate within the reinforced stone courtyard behind the Adventurers Guild in Alandra. A dozen guards jumped as they emerged, startled by the sudden return. One of them scrambled to the interior of the guild, shouting something about an emergency signal. Moments later, the massive guild doors opened. And out walked Guildmaster Thorn. What in the name of the first flame? He murmured. Kale stepped forward and saluted. Target neutralized. Rift has collapsed. Estimated close time, 1 hour 57 minutes. All party members accounted for. Thorn's brows lifted. Already? Yes, Guildmaster. His gaze moved slowly across the group. Darius bruised but standing, Reyna still glowing faintly with magic, Marianne dusty but intact, Shade leaning against a post, Lyra calm, and Inigo casually leaning against the wall with a turret dematerializing behind him. Thorn stared hard at W7. And that? Why familiar, Inigo said without skipping a beat. Aha. Reyna waved enthusiastically. His name's Wheeler. Thorn pinched the bridge of his nose. Right. Familiar. It doesn't feel alive but whatever. Marianne whispered. He also has a weapon that shoots so many fast projectiles that pierce the monster's armor. Stop helping, Inigo whispered back. The guildmaster exhaled. Well, I'll be damned. You brought back full packs. Rift-grade spoils. And you did it fast. He straightened. Get yourselves cleaned up. Report to dispatch. You've earned a bonus this time. Kale saluted again. Understood. As they turned to head inside the guild, Reyna gave Wheeler one last pat on its tread. Lyra nodded once to Inigo. Even Shade gave him a crooked smirk. And as they walked through the archway toward the mess hall, bags heavy with loot, hearts still high from victory. 10,000 gold coins. This is going to be exhilarating. I might really buy a house this time. The warm scent of roast boar and honeyed ale wafted through the halls of the Adventurers Guild in Alandra. The sun had already begun its descent, casting golden light through the stained glass windows of the great hall. Within, the atmosphere was electric. Cheers, claps on backs, tankards raised in tribute. Word of the party's swift and overwhelming success had already spread like wildfire as the Adventurers Guild opened after the rift's completion. The usual hush that followed most rift expeditions was absent. Instead, the guild was alight with celebration. Adventurers, some lounging at long wooden tables, others standing with goblets in hand, turned their heads every time Inigo or Lyra passed, nodding with quiet respect or open curiosity. At the center table reserved for returning rift squads, Kale sat flanked by Shade and Darius, both enjoying the luxury of hot food and actual chairs. Reyna had her feet kicked up on the bench, swirling a mug as she retold the story of WN7's adorable rampage, for the third time to a group of curious bronze-ranked adventurers. And then boom, she said, mimicking a missile explosion with her hands. The staff snapped clean off, like a twig. I swear, I think it was the turret's third or fourth shot that did it. Fifth, Inigo corrected mildly, sliding into the bench beside Lyra. You counted. Reyna blinked. Telemetry in the HUD, he said without thinking. Reyna blinked again. Don't ask, Lyra said with a knowing smile. Just roll with it. Before any of them could reply, the doors at the far end of the hall opened once again, and the chatter died down instantly. Guildmaster Thorn entered, trailed by 3 record keepers and a pair of armored guards. He moved with his usual brisk pace, though his eyes held a flicker of something rare, satisfaction. The crowd parted as he approached the party's table, and his voice echoed through the chamber, clear and commanding. Everyone present, bear witness. The hall quieted further. Even the tavern staff paused in their duties. Thorn stood tall, his long coat sweeping the floor as he addressed the room. The rift east of Alandra has officially collapsed. We received no advance warning, no scout report. It was handled by a 7-person team. He paused, letting that sink in. And not only handled but completed in record time, under 2 hours. There were gasps. Someone near the back whispered, "That's impossible." Thorn raised a hand, silencing them. Not only that, no civilian casualties. No structural damage. Full-body retrievals. Rift-grade cores. Confirmed kill of the monsters. If I hadn't seen the report myself, I'd have thought it fabricated. He looked over to Kale. Captain Kale, would you confirm your report for the record? Kale rose to his feet. Everything is accurate. The kills were clean. The tactics were effective. And 2 of our members far exceeded the expectations of their current rank. Thorn turned back to the gathered adventurers. You all know what that means. Murmurs rose. A few jaws dropped. Lyra leaned over slightly to Inigo and whispered, "Is this about to be?" He raised a brow. "Looks like it." The guildmaster's voice boomed again. "Inigo, Lyra. Approach." They stood. Lyra brushed a curl of hair behind her ear. Inigo adjusted the strap of his gear, nodding once. As they stepped forward, the crowd shifted, making way for them like the tide parting around stones. It was rare to see a double promotion. Rarer still for silver rank adventurers to skip the waiting period, the usual quota of missions, the grueling evaluations. But the battlefield had been the test. The battlefield never lied. Thorn gestured to the record keeper at his side, who opened a leather-bound tome and withdrew 2 golden brooches shaped like phoenix feathers. From this day forward, you are recognized as gold-ranked adventurers of the Alandra Guild. You are granted access to higher-tier commissions, diplomatic assignments and royal contracts. Your word carries weight. Your actions, consequence. He handed the first brooch to Inigo. Inigo accepted it without a word, fingers curling around the smooth metal. It was warm not just from the firelight but perhaps from the meaning behind it. He gave Thorn a quiet nod and the guildmaster returned it. Then Lyra stepped forward. Congratulations, Thorn said, handing her the second. Thank you, it's an honor. Thank you for your service. And to the rest of your party, as promised, you will receive 10,000 gold coins for completing the rift. Then the hall erupted into applause. Not just polite clapping but full-on cheering. Tankards slammed on tables, boots stamped the floor. Their party members rose to toast them, and even the barmaids began pouring rounds faster than ever. Kale sat back down with a faint smile, watching the two as they returned to their table. You earned it, he said. Reyna immediately flung herself across the table and snatched the brooch from Inigo's hand, inspecting it with a wide grin. It's making me want to become an adventurer. If only the salary is consistent and goes out to perilous journeys. There's no doubt about your accomplishment, Inigo, Lyra, Shade said with respect. Marianne leaned toward Lyra. You are so skillful in using your bow. Please don't. Reyna held up the badge like a trophy. Be proud of your achievements. I hope to see each other again soon in the city. If we see one another, Lyra said, smiling. The celebration carried on into the evening. The guild's main fireplace roared with fresh logs, and trays of roasted meat, honey cakes, and spiced cider flowed endlessly. Even the usually grim Kale accepted a refill from a passing staffer. Inigo sat at the corner of the table, brooch now pinned to his jacket just beneath the shoulder. Wheeler was parked quietly beside him, optics blinking slowly, a near sentry in the chaos of festivities. You okay? Lyra asked, nudging his arm. Yeah. Just thinking. About what? About what I am going to do with the reward, Inigo replied. 10,000 gold coins for sure could get me a house in the capital, right? Also, I'm thinking of business since, as Reyna mentioned, adventuring is a dangerous occupation. And I'm starting to like it here. Lyra smiled. There's no problem with that, but you are still going to fight, right? Of course. They clinked their mugs together. We are gold adventurers now, she said. Yes, it's so fast, he replied. The celebration had slowed by the time the guildmaster returned once more to the center of the hall. This time his presence carried the finality of a closing chapter. His voice wasn't booming now, just firm and clear enough to rise above the fading laughter and the clinking of mugs. For your service, your rift grade retrievals, and the swift elimination of the target, Thorn said, holding up a velvet pouch, you are awarded a reward of 10,000 gold coins, to be claimed at the Royal Bank of Alandra. He held up a parchment next, bearing the seal of the guild and the Royal Finance Ministry. This is your claim check. Present it at the bank by noon tomorrow and the funds will be released. For security purposes, we do not carry such coinage here in bulk. Kale stepped forward to receive the document on behalf of the party. He gave a short nod, then turned to the group. That's it then, he said. You've all earned a rest. Collect your payment tomorrow and don't get yourselves killed in the meantime. With a few final claps on shoulders and quick exchanges of thanks, the group began to disband. Reyna stood up first, stretching her arms with a yawn. All right, I'm heading back to my place. I'm 3 cups away from embarrassing myself. Marianne chuckled and followed after her. Same. I have temple duties in the morning, and I'd rather not explain to the head priestess why I smell like boar grease and mead. Darius slung his shield over his back and gave Inigo and Lyra a nod. Good job out there. Don't spend it all in one place. Shade, who had been silent for most of the celebration, simply offered a slight bow and left without a word, slipping through the crowd and out the main door like a shadow. Kale stayed a moment longer, sipping the last of his drink before setting the empty mug down and adjusting his cloak. You two handled yourselves well, he said. Tomorrow you'll be in a different league. Don't forget what got you there. With that he turned and followed the others out into the cool night. The guild hall was much quieter now. Only a few stragglers remained, some asleep at their tables, others too deep in conversation to leave just yet. A barmaid extinguished one of the side lamps while humming a tune. Inigo pushed away from the bench, stretching his arms. That was a lot. Lyra nodded. Feels strange, doesn't it? All of this, just a day after we were preparing for possible death. He offered a tired smile. Yeah. But I'm glad we made it through. They walked out of the hall together. The night air was cool and crisp, a refreshing contrast to the heat inside. Stars dotted the sky, and a few lanterns along the cobblestone streets cast pools of warm light as they walked. You know, Lyra said, folding her arms behind her head as she strolled beside him. 10,000 gold coins really could get you a decent house. Especially if you're not picky about being close to the plaza. I've been thinking about that, Inigo said. I don't want to live in an inn forever. As cozy as Amber's hearth is, it's still temporary. I agree, Lyra replied. Settling down a little, having a real home base, it changes things. He turned his head slightly to glance at her. So, you going to help me pick one tomorrow? Of course. She smirked. You'd probably buy the first place with a decent roof if I wasn't there to stop you. Inigo chuckled. You're probably right. They reached a small intersection where the lanterns dimmed slightly. Lyra slowed down in front of a modest two-story inn with a carved wooden sign, the Dancing Acorn. This is me, she said, gesturing toward the door. It's not much, but the rooms are clean and they don't water down the tea. Sounds like a solid deal. She hesitated for a moment, then turned back to him. Thanks for walking me. No problem. She stepped toward the door but paused again. Hey. I'm glad we were in that party together. Me too, he said honestly. I'll come by Amber's hearth at mid-morning. We'll go house hunting together. Don't be late. Wouldn't dream of it. With a final wave, she stepped inside and the door closed softly behind her. Inigo lingered there a moment, looking up at the inn's dark windows, then turned and started back toward his own place. The streets were empty now. The kind of quiet that only arrived in the middle of the night when even the cats had curled up somewhere warm. The faint scent of the guild's roast still clung to his jacket, and every step echoed slightly on the cobblestone. He passed by closed stalls and shuttered windows. Alandra was a peaceful city at night, and it reminded him that not every corner of the world was war or wilderness. Eventually he arrived at Amber's hearth. He entered quietly, giving a small nod to the innkeeper, who was dozing behind the counter with a blanket draped over her shoulders. Long day, she mumbled, eyes still half closed. Something like that, he said. Welcome back. He made his way upstairs to his room. It was simple, a bed, a desk, a window with iron latches, but clean and quiet. W7 rolled in behind him and parked itself near the corner. Inigo undressed, set the golden brooch on the nightstand, and sank into bed with a long exhale. The blanket was heavy and warm, the pillow just soft enough to sink into without swallowing his head. Tomorrow would be a busy day. House hunting, a bank visit, and maybe, just maybe, making a long-term plan. Not just for gold, not just for comfort, but for something permanent. He glanced at the ceiling, eyes already growing heavy. From a wandering Icecade person to a gold-ranked adventurer. It had all happened so quickly. He thought of Lyra's words, of Kale's nod, of Reyna's teasing voice, and even of Shade's quiet respect. Things were changing. And for the first time in a while, Inigo didn't mind the idea of settling down. Tomorrow he'd start building something of his own. But for now, he closed his eyes, let out a soft sigh and dematerialized Wheel Sun into his system. The morning sun slipped through the cracks of Inigo's curtains, casting soft light across the wooden floorboards. He woke before the usual knock from the innkeeper, his internal clock sharp from years of waking early, whether in his old world or this one. For a brief moment he lay still, staring at the ceiling, letting the quiet of the morning settle over him like a second blanket. Then he sat up, stretched, and got ready. Amber's hearth smelled of baked bread and tea as he made his way downstairs. The innkeeper, more awake this time, greeted him with a nod and pushed a cup of steaming tea across the counter. Guild heroes get free breakfast today, she said. Inigo chuckled. Then I guess I'll have to get used to fame. She rolled her eyes fondly. One breakfast. Don't push it. After a quick bite, he stepped out into the street, where the bustle of the city had already begun. The stalls were open again, hawking everything from woven cloaks to spiced sausages. But he wasn't headed to the market today. As promised, Lyra arrived just before mid-morning, wearing a simple traveling cloak and a neatly tucked blouse and pants combo. Functional but sharp. You're actually on time, she said as they met outside the inn. I didn't want you to make all the decisions without me, Inigo replied. Too bad. I'm already leaning toward a house with a garden. They shared a grin, then made their way to the Royal Bank of Alandra. The building itself stood just 2 blocks away from the central plaza. An imposing stone structure with polished marble columns and gilded archways. Uniformed guards stood at the entrance, eyeing every passerby with professional suspicion. Inside, the bank was quieter than expected, but no less intimidating. The floor was checkered with black and white tiles, and chandeliers of manolite hung from the ceiling like glowing vines. Attendants in gold-trimmed coats moved with practiced grace between counters and offices. A clerk noticed them immediately. "Adventurers from the guild?" he asked, eyeing the phoenix brooches they both wore. "Yes. We're here to claim the reward issued yesterday," Inigo said, producing the claim parchment Kale had given them. "Right this way," the clerk replied, leading them past the main hall and into a side chamber lined with iron-barred booths. At one of them sat a well-dressed woman in her mid-30s, hair in a tight bun and a ledger open before her. She adjusted her glasses and gave a courteous nod. "Name?" "Inigo and Lyra." "Gold rank?" "Rift completion." She flipped through several pages, then found the record. 10,000 gold coins each, she confirmed. "However, we do not recommend withdrawing the full amount in coin. Risk of theft, travel complications and wait." "We figured," Lyra said. "What are the options?" The banker reached under the desk and produced 2 long slips of parchment with intricate royal seals and golden threads running down the side. "These are banknotes, official documents redeemable at any royal bank across the kingdom. Each is unique and magically marked. You may choose to cash a portion now if needed, or hold the notes for larger transactions." "Do people accept these in day-to-day trade?" Inigo asked. "Only for large purchases, land, property, some merchants. But most establishments here in Alandra recognize their value. For daily use, you may wish to break them into smaller sums or deposit them into a carrying account." "Let's take 100 gold each in coin," Lyra said. "The rest in notes." "Agreed," Inigo added. The banker nodded and stamped their claim parchment. A vault attendant disappeared behind a steel door, returning moments later with 2 small pouches, heavy enough to clink, light enough to fit in a pocket, and the banknotes each folded into leather-bound sleeves. As they stepped back into the sunlight, Inigo tucked his note away into an inner coat pocket and tied the coin pouch to his belt. "Well," Lyra said, giving hers a light toss. "Feels real now." "Yeah. Gold-ranked adventurers with actual gold," Inigo said. "And now?" She turned on her heel. "House hunting." They made their way toward the residential district northeast of the plaza. The district had a quiet charm. Cobbled streets lined with old oak trees, small family gardens and rows of houses built from stone, timber, or sometimes a blend of both. A few estate brokers had offices here, marked by signs hanging above their doors. Alandra Property Holdings, Dunrow Realty, Oak and Stone Brokers. They chose the last one. The interior smelled of dried parchment and pine oil. Behind the desk sat a middle-aged man with gray streaks in his beard and a pair of sharp eyes. "Looking to buy or lease?" he asked. "Buy," Lyra said before Inigo could speak. "Something for one person but with room to grow. Nothing overly grand, just solid structure, quiet street, maybe a backyard." The man tilted his head, intrigued. "Oh, the practical kind. We don't get many of those. Most adventurers want towers or bathhouses." Lyra snorted. "He's not most adventurers." The broker pulled out a folio and flipped through it, then laid out 3 options. First was a stone cottage near the edge of the district. It had 2 floors, a storage cellar and a tiny greenhouse out back. But it was a little too far from the main road and the greenhouse roof was half collapsed. Next. The second was a 3-room timber home near the plaza. Beautiful design, freshly painted, but it had no backyard and the neighbor's forge was next door. Loud and always smoky. Inigo rubbed his nose. "Feels claustrophobic." "Last one then," the broker said. They walked with him to see it in person. A modest 2-story home near the bend of a stream. The building was mostly stone with wood trim. Ivy crept up one side, and the front yard had a small fence and a large tree with a bench underneath. Inside, clean floors, a working hearth, a study and an upstairs bedroom with windows facing east. "This," Lyra said, arms crossed, "is the one." Inigo walked through the living space slowly, running his hand along the wall. "Thought. Clean. Quiet. How much?" 1,800 gold, the broker said. "Fair." They didn't haggle. Back at the broker's office, Inigo filled out the deed documents and signed the parchment. Lyra helped him walk through the terms and he paid the amount with his banknote, deducting the amount and receiving the change in a smaller note for later use. By late afternoon they were sitting on the bench beneath the tree in his new yard. "Well," Lyra said, kicking off her boots. "You're officially a homeowner." "I still can't believe it," Inigo said. "Yesterday I was sleeping in an inn. Today I have a fence. Tomorrow you'll be complaining about garden maintenance." He laughed. They sat for a few more minutes in comfortable silence as the stream nearby babbled quietly. Eventually Lyra stood. "So now that you have a house, what do you plan on doing next?" "I'm thinking of another thing," Inigo hummed in thought. "I plan on starting a business." The sound of the stream filled the quiet as Lyra stared at Inigo with a raised brow. "A business," she repeated. "You just bought a house and now you want to open a business?" Inigo chuckled, leaning back on the bench. "I never said I was going to open a blacksmith shop or run an apothecary." "Then what?" Lyra tilted her head, curious. "I want to open a food place," Inigo said simply, his gaze drifting to the swaying branches above them. Lyra blinked. "A food place?" He nodded. She leaned forward slightly, both amused and intrigued. "Wait, you can cook?" Inigo grinned. "I can do more than just boil water and burn toast, yes. Back in my homeland I used to cook for myself all the time. And well, there's this one dish I've been missing like hell." "Is it soup?" Lyra guessed. "Or maybe a stew?" "Nope. Roasted boar." "Not even close," Inigo said, clearly enjoying the guessing game. "It's something called a hamburger." There was a beat of silence as Lyra's face shifted from confusion to suspicion. "Burger. Yup. That sounds like you're making a burger out of ham." "That's what most people think," he said with a laugh. "But actually it's made of beef. Ground beef to be precise. Shaped into a patty, cooked and sandwiched between two halves of soft bread. Then you can add cheese, lettuce, onions, pickles, sauce, whatever you want." Lyra's eyes grew wider the more he explained. Wait, slow down. Bread and meat, stacked? Together." Inigo nodded, his tone mockingly solemn. "Behold, the noble hamburger. King of simple pleasures. And then there's the sidekick, fries." Lyra frowned slightly. "Fries. Thin strips of potato. Fried in oil until they're golden and crispy. Sprinkle some salt on them, dip them in sauce. Divine." She leaned back, still trying to picture what he described. "So, it's not a stew or a roast but something handheld?" "Exactly. And people eat this. Like on purpose. People line up for it back where I'm from," Inigo said, laughing. "Fast, satisfying, cheap. It's the ultimate comfort food." Lyra rested her chin on her palm, eyes locked onto his. "You have my attention. But here's the real question. Can you actually make it?" Inigo raised a brow. "Are you challenging me?" "Absolutely." He stood and dusted off his coat. "Then let's go shopping." The local marketplace in Alandra was still humming with energy by the time they arrived. Merchants shouted their wares, children darted between stalls, and the scent of spices, fresh bread and roasted meats filled the air. Inigo walked with purpose, scanning the stalls like a hunter. Lyra trailed beside him, half curious, half skeptical. "All right," he muttered. "We need beef, eggs, bread, potatoes, onions. Maybe cheese if they have anything soft." "Are you sure this isn't some kind of elaborate joke?" Lyra asked as he inspected a slab of beef from a butcher's stall. "If it is, I've committed years of my life to the punchline." He handed over several silver coins for a pound of minced beef, then found some soft white bread rolls from a nearby baker. The potatoes came next, thick-skinned and firm, perfect for frying. Lastly, he bartered for a block of cheese and a small pouch of ground pepper. Back at his new home, Inigo set the groceries on the clean kitchen counter. The hearth still needed kindling, but once the fire was lit and a flat iron pan was placed over it, the room filled with the crackle and warmth of old-world cooking. Lyra took a seat at the small table, resting her chin on her hands. "All right, show me what you've got." Inigo smiled and got to work. He shaped the ground beef into 2 thick patties, seasoned them with salt and pepper and set them on the sizzling pan. The sound of meat searing filled the room, followed by the rich, savory aroma of cooking beef. "Gods, that smells good already," Lyra admitted, eyes widening. "I told you." Next he peeled and cut the potatoes into thin strips. They went into a separate pan of bubbling oil he'd prepared using rendered boar fat and vegetable oil. The potatoes hissed and sizzled, turning from pale to golden brown as he stirred them gently. He sliced the bread rolls, grated a bit of cheese and prepped the onions, sautéed lightly until they turned translucent and sweet. Once the patties were cooked and rested, he layered them between the bread with cheese, onions, and a spread made from crushed pickled herbs and a touch of local mustard. He placed one plate in front of Lyra with a portion of fries beside it. The burger didn't look extravagant, just rustic, slightly uneven and wrapped in parchment to keep it together. But the smell was unlike anything she'd encountered before. He stared at it. "Go on," Inigo urged. "Pick it up with your hands." She hesitated, then followed his instruction. The bread was warm, the cheese slightly melted. He took a bite. Her eyes lit up instantly. The table fell silent as Lyra chewed slowly, thoughtfully, then took another bite, this time faster. "Oh my gods," she mumbled, mouth still half full. "What is this?" "I told you. It's so rich. But also simple. The meat is tender, the onions are sweet, and the bread's perfect." She grabbed a few fries and popped one in her mouth. "These are crunchy," she said, delighted. "Like roasted but crisp." Inigo leaned back with a smug smile. "Welcome to fast food." She set the burger down after a few more bites and wiped her mouth with a napkin. "This is so delicious. If you can get people to try this," she said, "you'll make a fortune." "That's the idea," Inigo said. "I've been thinking, set up a small shop near the plaza. Nothing fancy, just a clean stall or corner building. Menu with only a few items. Hamburger, fries, maybe some kind of drink." Lyra nodded. "Start small, then expand once people get hooked." "Exactly. But there's one catch." Inigo raised a brow. "What's that?" Lyra leaned forward, grinning. "You're going to need help. You think you can run the shop, cook, take orders, clean, and manage supplies all by yourself?" "No," he admitted. "Good. Because I want in." Inigo leaned back against the kitchen counter, arms crossed as he watched Lyra finish the last fry. The golden light of late afternoon filtered through the open window, catching the sheen of oil still warm in the pan and casting soft shadows across the wooden floor. "You're serious?" he asked after a moment, his tone a mix of surprise and curiosity. "You really want to help me run this thing?" Lyra wiped her fingers with a cloth napkin and gave him a firm nod. "Dead serious. I'm not just saying it because that burger rocked my world. This could actually work, Inigo. Alandra's never seen food like this. If you're really committed to the idea, I want to be part of it from the start." He studied her expression. No trace of a joke, no hint of flippancy. Just that calm, focused look he'd seen when she sized up a monster or made a critical strike. It hit him then. Not only was she serious, she was already planning 3 steps ahead. He smiled. "Then let's do it. Just like that." "Well," he shrugged, "you're already helping me find a house, cook a test meal, and now plotting out a business with me. Might as well make it official." Lyra leaned forward and extended her hand across the kitchen table. "Partners." Inigo took her hand and shook it. "Partners." They both grinned, and for a moment the house felt a little less empty. By the time they stepped out into the city again, the sun had begun its descent, casting Alandra's rooftops in gold. The two of them made their way through the streets toward the eastern quarter, the marketplace district where merchants, food vendors, and small eateries operated in a vibrant sprawl of color, sound, and mouth-watering aroma. The air smelled of baked flatbread, grilled meat skewers, simmering stews, and sugary pastries. Street musicians played lutes or flute duets on corners. Children chased each other between carts. Traders called out prices and haggled with locals. "Not a bad place to start looking," Lyra said as they passed by a line of eateries. "These stalls and shops get constant foot traffic from morning to dusk." Inigo nodded. "We need something with decent space. A small kitchen setup, a counter for service. Maybe 1 or 2 tables. But not too big or the overhead will kill us." Lyra pointed at a narrow 2-story structure tucked between a tailor's boutique and a spice shop. The sign above it read Creswick's Pies, but the shutters were closed and the paint chipped. "That looks abandoned." They walked up to the front. Dust coated the windows and a faint paper notice had been nailed to the door. Lyra leaned in and squinted. "For lease. Owner moved to Cauldron Province." Inigo peered through the dusty glass. Looks like the main floor used to be a dining space. Kitchen in the back. Second floor's probably storage or housing. Lyra turned to him, excitement sparking in her voice. You thinking what I'm thinking? He nodded. Let's find the landlord. They tracked down the contact listed on the note. A man named Roffner who ran a string of properties in the district. His office was located in a sandstone building just a few blocks away, and when they arrived they found him sipping wine behind a wide desk littered with rental documents. You're here about the pie shop? He asked, raising a bushy brow. That's right, Inigo said. We're looking to lease it for a new food business. Roffner chuckled. Hope you've got a better menu than Creswick. Man nearly burned the place down trying to deep fry a goose. He pulled open a drawer and removed a scroll, unfurling it on the desk. Standard lease, but I'm willing to give a discount for the first 3 months. Rent's 80 gold per month. That includes property upkeep and street licensing, assuming you're not throwing keg parties in the alley. Sounds fair, Inigo said. Can we inspect the interior? The landlord snapped his fingers and a young clerk handed him a ring of keys. Moments later they were back at the shop, keys in hand. Inside the air was stale but not unpleasant. The space was narrow but deep with a long counter at the front and a modest kitchen behind it. The hearth was intact and though the shelves were dusty and the back room cluttered with old crates, the building felt sturdy. It has good bones, Lyra said, tapping one of the wooden beams. With a little cleaning this could work. Inigo opened the small hatch behind the counter that led to a coal oven pit. Even the old oven's still good. Back at the office, Inigo signed the lease. He used a portion of his smaller banknote to pay for the first 2 months up front, receiving a stamped receipt in return. Outside, the sun was dipping low, casting the buildings in amber light. Well, Lyra said, standing in front of their newly leased storefront, we've got a home, a shop, a recipe, and a team. Inigo chuckled. That team is just us. For now. They entered the shop once more and Lyra lit a pair of wall lamps using a flint rod. The dim orange glow lit up the interior, making the space feel more alive. I'll start sketching some layouts tonight, he said, pulling out a small notebook. We'll need a prep table, a cooking station, and somewhere to wash. We'll also need permits if we're going to sell to the public. I'll head to the guild office in the morning and ask around. They usually handle all that bureaucracy stuff for adventurers starting civilian businesses, Lyra said. And we need a nameplate. Inigo nodded. The Mcronald. Mcronald. Lyra tilted her head to the side. Who is Mcronald? Someone special for you? No, it's kind of the famous restaurant in my hometown, Inigo replied. She couldn't argue with that. I am going to make this restaurant look like them, and in just a week or two, we will conduct a soft opening, Inigo said. Okay, let's get to it immediately. Morning light spilled through the tall windows of Inigo's newly leased restaurant as he knelt by the dusty tiles, a pencil between his teeth and a rough sketchpad in hand. Lyra leaned over the counter behind him, watching with a curious expression as he traced out yet another square on the paper. That makes 4 different versions of a stove you've drawn so far, she said, raising an eyebrow. You designing a war machine or a kitchen? Inigo chuckled without looking up. Trust me, the battlefield and the kitchen aren't so different. Both need good layout and precise tools. One mistake in positioning and someone loses a limb, metaphorically. Lyra shook her head with a grin and stepped around to peer at the paper. So that's the deep fryer? Yep, he said, pointing. This rectangle here. We'll need a special iron cauldron for frying, adjustable heat channels underneath, kind of like a forge but tuned for oil instead of flame. We'll mount it right next to the prep table and beside that we'll have the bun oven. Then the wash station goes in the corner. And this, she asked, pointing to the counter layout. Customer-facing service area. Just like the food joints back home. Simple menu board above, one person takes orders, another preps and serves. Clean, fast, efficient. Lyra gave a low whistle. You really thought this through. Had a lot of time to observe during lunch breaks back in my hometown, Inigo said with a shrug. It's muscle memory at this point. Hey genius, she said. Let's talk permits. They made their way to the guild's civilian bureau that afternoon, a wing of the massive stone complex that handled everything from construction approvals to guild-sponsored education grants. After navigating a surprisingly short queue, they were ushered into a modest office where a sleepy clerk, thin and balding, greeted them with a bored expression. "Business permit for food sale?" he asked after glancing at their application. "Yes," Inigo replied, handing over their documents. "Restaurant grade, limited seating, operating under the name The Mcronald." The clerk blinked. "The Mcronald. It's a family name," Inigo lied smoothly. "Traditional food. HM. That'll be 3 silver for registration, 2 for the fire inspection and 1 for the health inspection. If you're planning to hire anyone, you'll also need to file an employer's registry." "We'll start as 2, Lyra said. "Just us for now." The clerk pulled out a thick scroll and scribbled their names onto several lines with a sharp, squeaky quill. "You'll be scheduled for inspections tomorrow and the day after. Once you pass those, the license will be posted publicly outside your shop." "Understood." Inigo nodded and paid the fee using a handful of coins. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Inigo spent the mornings drawing up designs and sourcing basic materials from the blacksmith's district. Thick cast iron pots, grates for the stove and heat-safe ceramic-lined trays for the fryer. He customized a dual-purpose firebox that could operate with steady coal heat and vent properly through a chimney. The local carpenter, a burly man named Redlawn, arrived with 2 apprentices to help refurbish the kitchen counters and strengthen the support beams. They reworked the service window, added a sliding hatch for plates, and polished the wood for customer seating. Meanwhile, Lyra handled the bureaucratic end. She dealt with the health inspector, a stern woman who practically sniffed for germs, and ensured that all food storage, ventilation, and prep surfaces passed scrutiny. She negotiated a special permit allowing Inigo to cook with imported spices from the eastern docks. Their biggest hurdle came with the supply chain. "Fresh beef, cut to burger shape?" the butcher asked with confusion when Inigo visited his shop. "You want it ground and then flattened into discs?" "That's right," Inigo nodded. "Thin patties. Uniform shape." "Never had that request before. Most folks just roast slabs or stew chunks. I'll have to assign one of my apprentices to learn the process." "I'll pay extra for consistency," Inigo said, handing over a small note with his desired meat-fat ratio. Potatoes were easier. The produce vendor, a cheerful woman with 6 kids, sold sacks of them at a discount in exchange for a promise that Inigo's fries would bear her stall's name on the menu. The partnership pleased her immensely. "What about buns?" Lyra asked one evening as they cleaned the floors. "You planning to make those yourself?" "No time," Inigo replied. "But I found a baker who'll use my recipe. Sweet, fluffy, slight butter glaze on top." He's skeptical, but I'll give him a test batch formula tomorrow. That night they worked by lantern light inside the shop. The prep station was finally built. 3 wide slabs for chopping, assembling, and wrapping. The oven gleamed with fresh polish. The fryer, a modified iron cauldron mounted over stone-lined coals, had its own wooden shield to prevent oil splashes. Lyra stood at the newly sanded counter, wiping it down. "It's actually happening," she murmured. Inigo looked up from where he was sorting spice jars and smiled. "It's starting to look like the real thing." She turned and leaned against the wall, arms folded. "You've been dreaming of this for a while, haven't you?" He nodded. "Yeah. Back in my old world, I never got the chance to build something like this. I was stuck in routines, always working under someone. Here, I get to create something. Share a piece of where I came from." Lyra softened. "You're not alone in it anymore." They shared a quiet smile. The kind of look that needed no words. The next morning, a sign was hung above the freshly cleaned glass windows. "The Mcronald, coming soon." Painted in bold red and yellow letters, just as Inigo remembered from his youth. They stood together on the cobbled street, gazing up at it like it was a monument. "I give it 2 weeks," Lyra said. "We clean, test recipes, do taste trials, and then we open." "Soft launch," Inigo agreed. "Friends, guildmates, a few regulars. If they like it, word of mouth will do the rest." He turned to her. "You think we're ready?" "I should be the one asking that, but I think so, we are ready." Together they stepped back inside their restaurant, rolling up their sleeves. There was still much to do, signboards to paint, uniforms to stitch, trial batches to cook. But the hardest part was over. This is his wet dream in the fantasy world, not only introducing freedoms but also what defined that freedom, which is a fast food restaurant. He'll introduce this world to the culture where he belonged and it's going to be a hit.